Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session. Before we get started, we'll allow a few moments for others to join us. And in the meantime, please feel free to make yourself comfortable by grabbing a snack or something to drink. We'll get started shortly. All right, South Carolina, welcome, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session on tariffs, trade, volatility, and what that means for farmers navigating today's economic pressures. This discussion is actually a follow-up to our previous webinar in May, which covered the impacts of rising tariffs. And today, our guest speaker, Mr. Quintin Gray, will review updates on current tariff changes and their implications compared to what we discussed previously. My name is Patrice Lazard, Freedmen Heirs Foundation's Communications Coordinator, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We also have Stephanie Silva, our Communications Associate, who will be manning the behind-the-scenes logistics for today's session. Now, before we get started, let's review a few quick housekeeping notes. Next slide, please. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Freedmen Heirs website and our YouTube channel. As a reminder, attendees' cameras are off and microphones are muted. Now, the chat will be open for comments and brief reactions, and we also ask that you please use the Q&A button to submit your questions for our speaker. We'll also open the floor for questions after the presentation, and following the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete an anonymous post-webinar survey that will be shared at the end. Next slide, please. Freedmen Heirs Foundation is a nonprofit organization with a mission to empower small and mid-sized farmers to build generational wealth by expanding market access, providing technical assistance, and enhancing financial resilience. Through our programming, we envision a future where small and mid-sized farmers build enduring wealth and leave a powerful legacy for future generations. If you'd like to learn more about Freedmen Heirs Foundation, please visit our website at www.freedmenheirs.org or follow us on all social media platforms. And if you haven't already done so, we ask that you please sign up to join our email list to stay up to date with the latest Freedmen Heirs Foundation news, program updates, events, and opportunities. Next slide, please. Now, today's guest speaker is Mr. Quintin Gray, Agricultural Trade Advisor and President and CEO of Q Gray and Associates. Now, Mr. Gray is a good friend of our organization, and he's well-versed in agricultural trade policy. So we're excited to have him present updates on the current trade climate and what this means for small and mid-sized farmers. And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Gray.
So much, Patrice. And thank you so much to the Freedmen Heirs Foundation for inviting me to speak. And I'm going to get started to tell you, I love that saying, get your drink, sit down and relax, because I'm going to try to tell a story. I think the best way to explain anything is to tell a story. Let me know when I can get my presentation up, because right now I don't see it. So should I go ahead and go back to the share portion to get it again? Let's see.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You should be able to access it.
Here we go. Oh. Okay. All right. First of all, the first thing I want to do is I want to get us all on the same page with respect to this word that we've been hearing a lot about lately, and that is the word tariffs and trade. There's been a lot of discussions about it. This is my favorite picture to use when I explain trade. I wish I had a rock. I wish I had a stick. And the way the cavemen used to exchange, they used to do what's called barter economy. They used to trade things they wanted to trade. So over time, trade became a little bit more sophisticated than that. You had ships coming mainly from Europe to the United States, bringing the settlers supplies. And then you
Oh,
had
I'm
the
sorry,
settlers. Can you hear me?
I don't see your presentation. Can you share it again, please?
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm so glad that you stopped me because I would have been going the whole way.
All right.
All right, technical issues will happen. Let me just get out and share it again. Okay, 1 second here. I'll figure it out how to do this. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. Share my screen. Sorry, folks. This is what happens when technology starts going awry. So I'm gonna have to pull my whole presentation up again.
All right, take your time.
Yeah. We good now?
There we go. Perfect. We got
Okay.
it.
Okay, so let's go to this picture, the one that I like the most to explain trade. Look, having been in the trade business for 30 plus years, stuff happens all the time. And what we've gone through the past year has been, I would say, warp speed does not even explain it. Just crazy, absolutely crazy is the best way to explain it. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. Um, I was involved with trade. I've been involved with trade as a foreign service officer for many, many years. I've seen trade disputes. I helped solve one early in my career when an importer from Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, got a box of meat with fat and interdispersed in the meat. And then they called me from the embassy. I believe my boss wanted me to go because he wanted to see how I was going to handle it. So I went there and I witnessed that fat that this company had put in, a US company. And then I explained to the importer that there's a process for him to get compensation for that product that was adulterated. And so I started solving trade problems many years ago. And so normally, when we moved away from this basic trade of barter, and the Europeans started exporting products to the United States, to settlers, and then the US started exporting tobacco and all the other products we had here in the United States to Europe. And that was like international trade. There was a point where tariffs were being collected on those products. So the US actually in the 1600s or whatever were collecting tariffs on product to finance the government. Now, mind you, I'm talking about 16, 1700s, not today we still have tariffs. But what we've seen recently has been an anomaly. It has been something that's just I just want to say it's just so unusual. And then you'll understand why in a second. So, under normal circumstances, countries get together and they negotiate trade agreements. They will have meetings. They have a series of meetings. This is from the what's called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, called the GATT. And this was way back, and I can't remember the exact year, but you're talking 40s or 50s in that time frame. And so countries came together, governments came together and said, we are going to negotiate these agreements. And mind you, they were signing agreements. Agreements are binding, which means that you are obligated to do certain things. It's not a what they call a trade deal, which I'll get into a little bit later. So North American Free Trade Agreement is the agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And at that time, when this agreement was signed, I was a young man working at the Department of Agriculture as an agricultural trade officer. And I was actually at a big industry event to celebrate the signature of NAFTA. Now, NAFTA was replaced by the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement. They call it UMCA. That agreement took the place of NAFTA during the first Trump administration. So the point I want to make is this: when there were trade tariffs set or trade disputes that one country had against another, they were negotiated through. There's a process for filing a complaint. There's a process for negotiating that trade agreement. What this presentation is going to do is I'm going to talk about where we were in 2024 before the Liberation Day of April 2nd, 2025. And that Liberation Day changed the whole trade environment for the world. And I'm going to explain to you exactly what has happened since April 2nd. And then I'm going to talk about what farmers and agribusinesses should do to tariff-proof their businesses. So before I do that, I want to talk about where were we in trade-wise in January 2025. And I'm going to take the US's four major trading partners. You have Canada, US trade. The US exported $349.4 billion worth of goods to Canada, and the US imported $412.7 billion. Let me just let those numbers sort of sink in as you drink your coffee or drink your tea. This is not a small amount of product. This is a major trading partner. Canadians fought with us in Afghanistan. They fought with us in wars. I mean, these are our blood brothers and sisters across the border in Canada. We trade a lot. So let's keep going. Mexico to the south of the United States, US exported $334 billion in goods and services. Mexico exported $505.9 billion to the United States. The US market is Mexico's top market, and I'm talking about all products, including food. The US is the top market for Mexico. So these are the volumes of trade that we've had with those countries. Now, you notice that with Canada and with Mexico, we have a trade deficit. So what? You're going to find out later what I think about that and what history has shown about that. So China, the US exports to China were 143.5 billion. And then the US imports from China, 438.9 billion. We have a huge trade deficit with China. This simply means they're exporting more to us than we're exporting to them. Now let's look at Europe. The European Union exported $370 billion worth of goods and services to the EU, and the EU exported $606 billion to the United States. Again, we have a trade deficit with the European Union. So the point I want to make is this. This is a simple thing that a lot of folks are missing on this trade deal, on trade. Just because you run a trade deficit doesn't mean you're not making money, okay? Look at all the folks around the world who are involved with you trading wheat, or you're trading corn, or you're trading apples, whatever you're trading. There's people in manufacturing, There are people and farmers who are involved in producing. You have transportation, logistics, shipping, distribution, inventory, packaging, warehousing. All these business entities are involved if you even trade a ton of anything, whether you're exporting it to overseas or whether you're importing it to the United States. So just the simple fact that we have a trade deficit, that does not mean that we don't have trade activity and that we're not profiting from that transaction. If you don't take anything else home, remember that one. I hope you take more than that home though. Now, April the 2nd, I put down here a day that will live in infamy. That was a statement made by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he was talking about, D-Day. But this day is the day that the world markets shook. Now let's go back down memory lane a little bit. Within 2 weeks of April the 2nd, the stock market lost some astronomical billions of dollars in value. Now it recovered. It did recover, but it lost billions in dollars. And there were ships that were like in the middle of the ocean who had to redirect because it was no longer profitable for that shipment to continue, let's say, to the United States. It had to be diverted to another country where it could become profitable again because of these tariffs. Then the thing that probably will go down in history as the most, I hate the word to use the word bizarre, was this. You guys probably don't remember this formula, even almost forgot it myself. This is the formula that the White House used to calculate the tariffs on countries. This is what they use. I'm just going to read a little bit. Trade balance. If U.S. exports are less than imports, the U.S. has a trade deficit, in which case the formula is applied. Regardless of country, the U.S. basically divided the trade balance by the value of imports, blah, 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 blah. And then to top it all off, if none of these apply, we're going to give you a 10% tariff on top. Even if we have a trade surplus with you, we're going to charge you 10%. The world was just like, what in the world is going on here? Why are we doing this? What are we doing? They're trying to figure it out. So that formula will be in history books for many years. So the consumer pays tariffs. I've said this, I've been saying this all year. The consumer pays the tariff. Now, who pays the federal government? Because the administration is saying that it has collected all these billions and trillions of dollars, or at least billions, they claim, in tariff revenue. Now, when an importer imports cocoa or coffee or whatever, that importer is the one who's going to pay the federal government the tariff. So normally, under normal circumstances, that importer will charge or pass that cost down to the consumer. And the consumer will eat that cost. And there's increases in inflation. And we've seen inflation over time. I remember saying in April, March, I was saying that inflation is a funny animal. It's not going to just happen overnight. It is not something that just happens. It happens over time. So I'm going to use Walmart as the example, the number one retailer in America. What happened when they had to start paying more? Well, first thing they did was they stocked up. They stocked up on a lot of items in their warehouses. And so they said, well, these tariffs are coming. Let's buy everything we can. Let's fill our warehouses up. And then they did not want to get on the bad side of this administration. So they said, we're going to eat some of the costs of these tariffs. We're not going to pass them on to the consumer as we normally do. We're going to eat them. Now, my good friends on this webinar, that time frame has gone. So Walmart and other retailers are saying, we're running out of our stock of what we bought in advance. And now we're going to have to start passing these costs on to consumers. So the inflation rate is at 2.7% right now. Economists say, and I claim to be one of them, say that they probably would have been about 2.2% if it had not been for the tariffs. So here we go. I would think the most frustrating part about the tariffs is not so much the tariffs alone. It's the reasons we get for the tariffs that have just been all over the board. We have, first, it was the trade deficits. Okay. US runs trade deficits all the time, and we have them almost, even now, we still have them. Fentanyl shipments to the United States. If you're going to Mexico about the fentanyl, no one would complain because that's where it comes from through China to Mexico and then to the United States. But Canada, the amount of fentanyl that crosses the border is basically you can carry it in a suitcase. It's not much at all. And it kills people, no doubt. But it's not the main reason for the tariffs. Everybody knows that now. Then we had a situation where the former Brazilian president, Bolsonaro, was trying to overthrow elections in his country. And so this administration said, we're going to penalize the Brazilians for bringing a lawsuit against the former president for trying to overthrow the election. I believe now he's in jail. So this administration put a 50% tariff on Brazil. That is a non-starter with trade. That's almost saying we're stopping trade with you. Then the countries taking advantage of the United States. That's like a general, that's like a stop all. Oh, all these countries are taking advantage of the United States because they're exporting more to us than we are to them. Blah, 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 blah. Look at Lesotho. Lesotho is a small country in Southern Africa, not far from South Africa, and they produce textiles, pants and jeans and things that they export to the United States. We put a tariff on them. Now, Lesotho would love to buy a Ford or would love to buy a Chevrolet, but they cannot afford to buy one. So there are countries that wouldn't mind buying from us if they had the money to do so, but they were exporting to us what they produce. And we put tariffs on them, Lesotho. I won't even talk about that island that has no people. Okay, so it was like all over the board. Now, everybody and their mama was thinking that last year the administration learned a lesson, but they were wrong. So this year, the administration just threatened tariffs on EU countries that do not support the US's purchase of Greenland. You see, I mean, these tariffs have been like all over the board, and the market reacted just a day or so ago by a steep drop and then came back up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the stock market and trading because tariffs is a tricky thing. It leads to different results for different folks. And then lastly, the administration has used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And you're going to hear a lot about this going forward. A lower court has said that the administration cannot just willy-nilly put tariffs on countries, that it has to go through Congress. But the authorization that the administration uses is called the International Emergency Economics Powers Act, meaning that it has declared a national emergency. So, in other words, it's saying everything we declare as an emergency is an emergency, so we can use this authorization. So the Supreme Court has been looking at this since late last year and is supposed to rule sometime in the coming weeks or months on what the powers of the administration actually, the powers the administration actually has to impose tariffs without congressional approval. I want to go back to this Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee, for those of you who didn't know that. I was fortunate enough in my foreign service career to live in Ethiopia for a few years. And this lady pouring this coffee in these cups, and they always serve the coffee with popcorn. I put this picture up here because I said, what's the example of tariffs more than looking at what went on with Ethiopia? Because Ethiopia, we don't produce coffee. We don't produce enough coffee in the United States. We might have a little bit in Hawaii, but we don't produce enough coffee to supply the demand. So when the Ethiopians and everybody else is shocked that they got assessed a 10% tariff. Now let's back a little bit. Prior to 2022, Ethiopian coffee was coming in duty free. And then there was some alleged human rights violations due to a civil conflict they were having in country. The U.S. took them off of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, took them out of it. So they had no longer had the duty-free status of exporting to the United States. But then with the Liberation Day, they got assessed a 10% tariff rate on them. And so what impact did that have on Ethiopian coffee and coming to the United States? We import quite a bit from Ethiopia. Well, actually, it didn't have a big impact because we have put a 50% tariff on Brazil. Brazil is the biggest export producer or the biggest producer of coffee for export. So actually the Ethiopians have done well in these circumstances. They probably have their coffee has gone up in value, and that is fine. You know, they're doing fine. But it was a head scratcher for everybody to see the U.S. imposing tariffs on Ethiopia and other countries like Lesotho and other countries where it just didn't make a lot of good sense. Now, what has happened since April the 2nd, Liberation Day? The good news, the stock market bounced back. And it's bounced back because of AI, artificial intelligence investments. Now, you probably say, oh my goodness, if we were human beings making these investment decisions, then we would be more reactive to all of this market disruption. A lot of the trading done on the stock market now is done through artificial intelligence. So you have two parts of artificial intelligence. You have the artificial intelligence of using the technology to make investments. Artificial intelligence can do more. They can figure out stuff a lot better than most of us can in terms of what a good investment is. Then the other thing is the physical infrastructure for artificial intelligence. And I'm in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia area, and there are a lot of artificial intelligence facilities that are being built. These are mega information data hubs that are, whenever you use Chat GPT, is one of those places like that are actually doing the calculations. That's why you can come up with a beautiful report in like 2 seconds, or you can write a report and end up having all this information that comes up, and like it's almost like magic. Actually, it is pretty amazing. So the second impact, the stock market has been good. Your investment accounts have been, if you have pensions or you have retirement accounts, for the most part, they fared well. Actually, they fared well. I tell it the way it is. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't, I try not to come up with stuff. If I see something that happens positive, I'm not guaranteeing you it's going to stay like that in 2026. But in 2025, the market has been very strong. And the main reason is AI technology. Now, inflation has been creeping up. It's at 2.7%. And 2.7% is higher than what the Federal Reserve wants. The Federal Reserve wants 2%, but it's been creeping up. It's been steady around that 2.7, 2.8 range. Now, the administration, after April's big announcement, said that they were going to negotiate individual country agreements. So it said that the administration is going to have 70 trade agreements. And that's what they said in April. So, how many trade agreements? Let me mind you, the US, Mexico, Canada agreement took 2 years to negotiate. How many agreements have they negotiated? Zero agreements. Let me let that sink in. Zero agreements. They have come up with about 8 trade deals, which are framework of an agreement. And the difference is they're not binding. So a country can come in and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to invest these monies into the U.S. economy, we're going to buy this, and we're going to do this, and then they can walk away and basically do nothing. And then there is no enforcement mechanism in place to force them to do so. Now, bad news. And the reason why we hear, for the most part, is the farmers are hurting. The farmers are hurting. Now, I don't know how true this is, but in the news media, Arkansas farmers, almost 1/3 to 2/3 of Arkansas farmers are poised to file for bankruptcy. Okay. And the number of farm bankruptcies is going up. It was last year, it's expected to go up this year for 3 reasons. Well, 2 to come right here on the sheet. For low commodity prices, high input costs. It's expensive to buy inputs now, fertilizers, etc. And then the export markets they had and relied on have been declining. And that's because of the disruptions made in a tariff situation. I'll use Canada as the example. Canadians used to love that Kentucky bourbon. They really loved that Kentucky bourbon. They were a big client of the United States in Kentucky bourbon and alcohol. So as a result of the U.S. I keep saying administration because I want to make it general. The administration basically started talking about making Canada the 51st state, and that really ticked them off. So a lot of the provinces decided they were going to pull the product off the market. And that's where we are right now. A lot of the provinces in Canada are not carrying American goods. So we've lost the Canadian market. We got the Chinese mad at us because they mad at us because of those tariffs. And in September, when we should have been selling soybeans to China, this Chinese said, we'll teach them a lesson. We're going to buy zero of their new crop. So in September, when the China should have been purchasing from the United States, they were purchasing nothing. Okay, zero. And they said, we're going to buy from Brazil. There we go. Brazil is taking our market. And then to add insult to injury, then the U.S. gave Argentina a sort of a aid package of like $20 billion aid package to Argentina. What did Argentinians do? They turned around, reduced the tariffs on their product, on their soybeans, and sold to China. Boy, you talking about some farmers that are just mad. I mean, mad, just angry at us, the administration, for doing that. Okay. There have been negotiations since then. That's the next bullet point I have here. So the administration made a deal with China to purchase a certain amount of soybeans, I think 12 million metric tons of soybeans from the United States before the end of the year. Now, that deadline of the end of the year slipped to February, but apparently, at least based on what I'm reading, the Chinese have purchased about $10 billion worth of product. So they're on target to meet that 12 million by the end of February, which was the date push. The last time we had a trade war with China only, think about this, not the other countries in the world, not the EU, not all these countries that were affected by Liberation Day, the US farmer lost $28 billion. $28 billion. At that time, there was an aid packet of, I think, about $23 billion that the US Department of Agriculture made available to farmers. This year, the relief package is for $12 billion. I know it sounds like a lot of money. And if I were getting 1 billion of, no, if I was getting a couple of million of that, I think I'd be pretty happy. But for the whole farming sector, 12 billion is not, it nowhere meets the need. 11 billion of that is for row crops, what we call wheat, soybean, corn, those commodities. 1 billion is for everything else, like cucumbers and tomatoes, etc. And then the USDA announced this program, and they literally gave days for farmers to get their paperwork in. The first payments are supposed to go out in February, and farmers have to make their decisions. They should be making the planning decisions right about now. So the farmers are like, what do we do? Where do we go? Is the situation with China going to improve? I'm going to tell you right now, China has invested money in the Brazilian agriculture, has invested in infrastructure, and is gearing up to have them as their main supplier and to X us out of the equation. So that's where they're going. Last bullet point on what has happened is there's a thing called the Beige Book from the Federal Reserve, and it tracks economic conditions across much of the country, and is finding out that the tariffs are being paid by the consumer, as I have been saying since April the 2nd, that the consumer is going to pay. And now the Beige Book from the Federal Reserve is saying exactly that. So what has happened with grocery prices? Everybody talking about grocery prices. I just went to the grocery store right before coming here. So I'm going to tell you it wasn't cheap. I went to Costco, and then I went to a grocery store called Wegmans. So I'm real. And so ground beef has gone up about 12.9%. Apples, sugar and sweets are up. Alcoholic beverages, 4.6%. Price of eggs are going down and lettuce have gone down. Okay, there's some good things in there. Coffee's going up 21%. And bananas are up about 7%. So it got so bad. The situation at the grocery store we call affordability, which is the new buzzword for everybody. So affordability had gotten so bad that the US administration decided to reduce the tariffs on things that we don't produce. Head scratcher. Why would you have put tariffs on stuff we don't produce in the first place? So the administration came in and said, we're cutting tariffs on 200 products, and they included beef in that. So as a beef producer, and it took you all this time to get a fair price for your product, what were you thinking when the US decreased tariffs on beef to increase the exports of beef to the United States? So, and the administration also talked about giving Argentina special permission to export beef to the United States. That roused some hairs and some feathers, as they say, because the beef industry say, wait a minute, what is going on here? Why on earth are we allowing Argentina beef to come in here and replace US producers and to make us get lower prices for our commodity? Okay, there's another story. Let's keep going. So major tariff related economic impacts. Jim Beam, as I talked about Kentucky, off the shelves from Canada and but Canada were the main purchasers of Jim Beam. And Tyson's Foods closed a plant in Nebraska, laid off 4,900 employees, and it has cut the beef processing capacity to 5%. This is a big deal. One of the biggest problems in the United States is that beef processing, what happens to the animal once we want to make steaks out of it, we call it processing to make it sound better. So the processing facilities There are four major ones: GBS, Tyson's, and two others. They control almost the whole processing market in terms of processing animals. A farmer can produce cows, but have to wait a month or two to be able to bring it to market, just to have slaughter and bring it to market. So it's a big problem. It predates this administration. And the last administration tried to come up with some monies to help to lessen the severity of the problem, but it's still there. So with this plant closing or these plants closing in Nebraska and Texas, what has happened is the meat processing, beef processing capacity is decreased by 5%. That's huge. That is huge. So that means that farmers are going to, even if they can produce, are going to have a hard time getting the animals processed. Consumer prices have been a core inflation is still stand around 2.6%. And like the economists would say, it would have been about 2.2% without tariffs. Unemployment rate has climbed to 4.6%. And for young folk coming out of college right now, it's pretty tough. They're just it's hard to find jobs. Um, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I do want to mention manufacturing jobs. One of the main reasons why these tariffs were supposedly implemented. So manufacturing job employment is down 49,000 jobs from February last year to September. And other economic growth indicators concerning manufacturing has been sort of mixed. There have been a little few positive things, a few negative things, but it's been a mixed bag. It's just the job growth has not occurred. At least this is, to be fair to everybody, 1 year in an administration is not long. So I'm not going to say that this. I'm not going to make a prognosis on what this is going to be 2 or 3 years down the road. So I want to talk a little bit about this K-shaped economy. K-shaped, because you're going to hear a whole lot of people talking about it as we go forward. Different strokes for different folks. Some of us remember what that stands for. But the point I'm trying to make is there are folks that are well off. There are people who are less well off. Wealthy folks invested in the stock market, have money to invest and spend. Boy, they've had a great year. This year has been phenomenal for them. Our president and others in the billionaire class, this year has been amazingly good. Okay, AI investments are up. Pension funds are doing well. Thank goodness for that. At least I can say that was good for me. Now, who's hurting? Who's less well off? Farmers, the average consumer, not the folks that are sort of okay. I'm talking about people who are living paycheck to paycheck. New to the workforce, recent college grads are really, really struggling right now. They have high debt loads. They paid a lot to go to these colleges, and these colleges are still collecting money from them. Over $1 trillion of money that parents and former college students are paying on loans. Over $1 trillion of that is still being paid. And instability. Right now, there are rising costs and job instability. It's the market situation is pretty bad. Okay, here's the K-shaped economy. As you'll notice that, we went out of COVID, we got into like an economic recession period. Then after the recovery, technology, retail, sales, and software companies did okay. They're doing okay. Industries needing assistance like travel, entertainment, hospitality, food services. As you noted, those folks at the bottom half of this curve, the one that are at the bottom part of the K curve, is definitely those folks that include most of us. We're the folks who are in hospitality, entertainment, travel, food services, which is restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. So we're the ones who are still in a sort of a recessionary period, whereas there's certain high-tech jobs that are actually doing pretty well. US in another trade war with China. I'm going to tell you right now. We keep going in trade war with China. I'm not going to keep too much time with this. Um, I already talked about the fact that China is now at a point where they are buying soybeans again, but there's no guarantee, and they've limited their purchase of other products. So it's no guarantee that they're going to be purchasing like that in the coming year. Now, I'm getting to the best part of my presentation. What do you tell farmers and agribusinesses? You tell them it's time to be Scrooge. It's time, as one farmer put it, to sit on your wallet. Don't make any big financial expenditures because the environment is too uncertain for that. Keep track of USDA relief programs like that $12 billion program they just announced a few weeks ago. They're not going to tell you much. They're not even going to make a huge announcement. It's just going to come. And then the farming community, if you have a good information channel, will let you know. But you need to keep up with this yourself. You need to actually look at this yourself. Then try to diversify your operation. Look at community supported agriculture, meaning getting subscriptions for product. And you deliver a product for at a certain time for a client that pays a certain price. It's like that chart I have of two cavemen exchanging. You need to think like that. E-commerce, you need to have your products on the internet. Agro-tourism, I'm going to give some examples of that coming as to how you can make more money on your farming operation. First thing you need to do, and I know I said this before anybody ever listened to me, you need to make a financial accounting of what your economic situation is and financial situation is. You need to actually do some detailed work, know where your money's going, know when it's coming out. I was at the National Black Growers Council conference and a few months back, and one of the bankers talked about a client, a farmer, who had all his bills due. I'm just going to make up a date, April. And his money came in August. I'm just pulling it out of the sky. So, how would you make all your bills due at one date and all of your monies come in another date? So the simple solution was for him to go to his bankers and say, I get paid, this is what I do, I get paid certain amount of time of the month. Can I get my due date to be due during that time? It's simple things. So now's the time to do a financial accounting, and don't play with this because, as one other banker at the conference talked about, your financial records and your ability to present your financial records is an indication of your business operations viability. So you really have to pay attention to this. The Tenney Group, they don't pay me 1 cent, but I know that they do accounting work. They've helped so many farmers, especially Black and brown farmers, to get their accounting house in order. And I just love how they present themselves. They do a great service to farmers and small businesses. And then Farmers Click is an online platform that actually you can put your products online and get purchases online by going through Farmers Click. They don't pay me anything either, but I publicize them because I know of their work and I know how hard they are working to help farmers and to help small businesses. Now, Seven Springs Vineyard. I heard the father talk about this operation. Um, maybe for some of the siblings, some of the siblings' kids, he's the grandfather, but he's the patriarch of the family. And he talked about how he had a vision to have his farm in North Carolina become a destination place for activities. So they started organizing festivals, concerts, galas, weddings, etc. And then they put lodging on the farm. And then to make things real good, they invited their neighbors to be part of the business in terms of giving them certain little, so everybody was getting paid. So you weren't going to get complaints from folks when you're living out in the country and everybody in the country in the area is benefiting. They bring in bands, They bring in groups, even come from overseas, that will pay for the whole thing to have time in the United States and relax, etc. Um, yeah, I mean, look them up. They actually, I told them I was going to use them as an example, and they sent me this. They are, I love what they said. Our number one priority is to make certain we have security. So they are very security conscious from the very beginning. And then they talked about how they don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to, there's like, you've heard of people a white day, everybody comes dressed in white. And he said they do white, they don't reinvent, or they have a Valentine Day event, or they have other kinds of events. So they don't want to reinvent the wheel. Similarly, there's Marcellus Farms in Brandywine, Maryland. They do the same thing. They have a facility, beautiful housing there, like little small apartments. They have churches that rent out their place. They have a place for eating. They're building new facilities on the farm, and they are making farming it's called agrotourism, and they're making it work. That's me on a hot day at a farm that's about 20, 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And the farm is a sunflower seed farm. They charge, I want to say, I can't remember the exact amount, maybe $19 per person to go on the farm. And with that money, you can pick about 3 or 4 sunflowers. And then if you pick more, they will count them at the end. You'll pay a surcharge for the extra ones you pick. But it's a good outing, you know. You go out there, you drive there. They have like a little truck that you ride on, and they'll drop you off in the field, and you can stay out there all you want to, as long as you want to. And you go out there, and it's nice and fresh. You see the sunflowers, you pick your sunflowers. Think how you can turn your farming operation, and then once you finish, you jump back on the trailer that does like a loop, comes back, and you go to a place where they have all these honeys and other products that they produce on the farm for sale, and they're making money. I mean, they had a lot of folk there today. I was there. And so it's you got to really think about ways you can diversify your operation. Now, I've already said, make certain you keep track of USDA programs, because USDA is coming up with new programs all the time. They know they have a job to do, and they know farmers are hurting. So they're going to be coming up with all kinds of programs in the near future that you have to pay attention to. As I mentioned before, I talk about tariffs and trade through my own forum that I created. And if you're interested, this is the link. And since I'm here for Freedmen Heirs, I'm not going to do my own self-promotion this time. But if you want to contact me, here's my contact information. And that's all I have. And I hope you got it. I hope you got a lot out of that, because I put a lot into it. Thank you so much. And I'm ready for any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray, for that presentation. We'll now open the floor for questions. I see we do have one in the chat, Mr. Gray, so I'm going to go ahead and read it off to you now. It says, how do we support our U.S. farmers through these chaotic times besides buying locally?
Hmm. Wow. Um, Besides buying locally, because that's what I would have said. You should be supporting your farmers by buying locally. Now, the other way you can support farmers, and I'm going to say this because I've been working with farmers my whole life. I come from an Easter farm in Eastern North Carolina, as folk on the line might know, Williamston, North Carolina, plug for my hometown. Farmers in general are not vocal advocates. They are not the people who are going to get out there, and they're not going to, in general, be very vocal. If you want to support your farmers, and you've talked to farmers and they've expressed to you the difficulties they're facing now economically, share that with your congressman or your elected official, because it makes a difference. The elected officials are the folks who are going to be making legislation or supporting programs that are going to support the farmers. So I would say purchase local farmers' products, number one. I would say go to your officials and let them know that the farmers are hurting. And then I want to make a special appeal to folks who want to support Black and brown farmers. That the history of what's going on in America with Black farmers, we've gone from 100 years ago, 10, 12% of farmers associated or identified as a person of color, down to 1 or 2% that identify as a person of color. So farmers are now, how do I support those farmers who are still farming? Some of the big issues that the farmers are dealing with, input costs, low cost for commodity, that's common to all farmers. But a problem that Black and brown farmers are facing deals with heirs property issues. That is, being able to pass their property down from one generation to the next. Now, there is some training that's going on through Alcorn University, through um, the I can't remember the name of the center, and I know they're going to be mad if they listen to this, but the center that deals with those issues of helping Black farmers, they're actually providing training for heirs property issues, and I would say be supportive of that kind of initiative because that's going to help farmers to know how to get their property to stay in the family from one generation to the next. Thank you. That's a great question.
All righty. We're nearing our the end of our time here, Mr. Gray, but I have one more question that I want to ask you before we close out the session. So with everything that you said, how do tariffs interact with other pressures farmers are facing right now, such as interest rates and labor shortages, or even difficulty obtaining operating loans?
Wow. I tell you, when you guys give a question, you sort of load it up, don't you? Um, the labor shortage is real. Um, I'm going to be very blunt here. A lot of agriculture in America was being harvested with illegal immigrant labor. This is a fact. I was doing a presentation some time ago, and I put up a slide of a job announcement that was made in North Carolina, trying to get workers to work in, let's say, tobacco field. It could have been anything. They got native born, I mean, US born, like less than 10%. Everybody else was from somewhere else originally, and they just can't find the labor. They just can't find it. So labor is a big issue. Then, bringing in people under these HB1 or HB2, the visas where you can bring in workers, temporary workers. The whole process is so cumbersome. And then the cost associated, they have to pay the laborers coming from Mexico, for example, more than what they would pay a laborer that is from the US. So that becomes a non-starter. Labor is a huge, huge issue for farmers. Input costs are also a big issue that farmers are facing. Tariffs is a direct influencer of input costs. Let me give you an example. Farmers need phosphate. And guess what country is the main supplier of 80% of US phosphate? Canada. Okay? Canada. And Canada is not happy with us these days. Okay, and they put tariffs on the phosphate. That's number one. That's another thing. And guess where fertilizers, a lot of the fertilizers come from? Believe it or not, Saudi Arabia. I was the agriculture trade officer in Saudi Arabia, and I didn't learn that until I got here. That Saudi Arabia is a big producer of fertilizer. Nobody's quite happy with us these days for putting on tariffs. So farmers having to pay more. Lastly, and no, not lastly, next to last. Let's think about the equipment that's coming in from overseas. A lot of the equipment for small farmers are coming from overseas. They're being imported. Now, of course, you know the tariffs have gone up on them too. So that means you have to pay more for a small piece of equipment. Now, let's get to the loans. I used to be years ago, my first job out of college was as a loan officer credit analyst for a bank. So I'm pretty familiar with this area. So agriculture lending is a different animal. Collateral that you take for a farm from a farm is different than what you use for buying an automobile, for example. An automobile is the collateral, but for a farm, it's different. So farmers are facing a tremendous burden to get loans. When I say farmers, I'm not talking about Black, African American. I'm talking about farmers as a whole lot. They're having problems getting credit. Number one, they're already highly leveraged in terms of they have farming equipment that has high monthly payments that they cannot pay. And the reason they cannot pay it is because the price they're getting for their soybeans, wheat, or corn is not high enough for them to make enough profit to be able to afford the payments. And then they lost markets. So they lost a lot of the China market, they lost a lot of the Canadian market, they lost a lot of the market from other places. So they're sitting here. This is where the average farmer is right now, sitting here with commodities, and the U.S. producer is the top producer in the world, most highest quality and best. I believe that, and that's what I promoted my whole career. But you can produce the best soybean and get the lower price and not be able to pay your bills. So farmers are here now at a point where they should be making farming decisions, but they're going to the banker and they're getting some sobering news from the banker. The banker's saying, this doesn't make any economic sense. You're getting a certain amount of dollars for your soybeans. You pay this amount. You're still in a deficit. So how are we going to lend you any money? So right now, there are a lot of farmers out there that have to say, they have to make certain that it's a time of reckoning. For some farmers, they're not going to stay in business. They just can't. There are other farmers who will try, but they're going to plant less than what they normally plant. So this coming year, this coming planting season is going to be the most interesting one because now the farmers are going to be feeling a year effect of tariffs and what impact it's had on their input costs and what impact it's had on their markets that they normally depend on. And then their ability to get credit from the lenders has been severely hampered because of the current situation and tariff situation. I would say situation that the tariffs have created. Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Gray, for all of your insights. And we're actually have reached the end of our time today. So like I'd like to say again, thank you again for that insightful presentation. I know I learned a lot. And I'm sure our guests have learned a lot as well and really appreciate the information that you've given us. And thank you to everyone who joined the session for taking time out of your afternoon to participate in this webinar. So with that, I'll say, if any of you have any further questions or if you would like more information on today's topic, please don't hesitate to reach out to Mr. Gray. He has his contact information here listed on the screen, and I'm actually going to drop his email address in the chat right now. All right, you should all be able to see it. All right. And as a reminder, we will be sending up a follow-up email with a recording of this session to all registered participants. And another note, as you exit the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a short anonymous post-webinar survey. This feedback is greatly appreciated and it helps us improve our future sessions. So with that, thank you again, Mr. Gray, for your time. And be sure everyone to stay connected with us for future webinars and updates, and we look forward to having you with us again soon. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Mhm.